You're listening to a new episode of The Brave Technologist, and this one features Rob Viglione, who is a co-founder and CEO of Horizon Labs, the development studio behind several leading Web3 projects, including ZK Verify and Horizon. Rob served in the U.S. Air Force for several years and was deployed to Afghanistan, where he supported Special Operations Task Force intelligence efforts. During his time, he developed an early interest in Bitcoin, recognizing its potential benefits for countries with unstable economies. Today, Rob's work focuses on Web3 scalability, blockchain efficiency, and zero-knowledge proofs. With the growing convergence of AI and blockchain, Horizon Labs is also exploring how ZK proofs can be used to help verify AI model outputs without compromising privacy. In this episode, we discussed his transition from military intelligence in Afghanistan to co-founding a blockchain company, zero-knowledge proofs, what are they and why are they so important in today's digital landscape, and real-world examples that show how ZKPs and Web3 can enhance privacy and the user experience for the average person and what's stopping privacy from becoming the default. And now for this week's episode of The Brave Technologist. Rob, welcome to The Brave Technologist. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Luke. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for this interview. It's been we've been wanting to have more folks from the ZK side of things on the show to kind of get in the weeds on this a bit, and really looking forward to this one. So just to kind of set the table a bit, we did a little bit of looking into your background a little bit. It seemed pretty interesting too. Like, you know, you kind of went from military intelligence in Afghanistan to co-founding a blockchain company. Like, what kind of got you into that mindset and put you on that journey, just to kind of set the table a bit?
Yeah, I think for me, the through line is I've been a big libertarian, and that's how I got into Bitcoin early on. So it was kind of the domain of like cypherpunks and libertarians early. So for me, it was more of like I've loved the idea of programmable money, the idea of competition in the monetary domain just was super cool. It just happened to work out. I mean, it was kind of crazy early on, right? That no one would have guessed that Bitcoin would be where it is now. But for me, there was a gap in between going from the military world into running a Web3 company. The gap for me was academia. So I actually shifted careers. So I took a little bit of time off from my former career as a physicist and mathematician working with the U.S. Air Force. To go and getting my PhD in financial economics.
Awesome. Like, what was the timeline for all this? When did you go kind of leave the military and kind of get in academia and then move into the crypto world?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe like timeline for me, like in the Bitcoin, world, I started getting involved in 2013 when I was at Camp Leatherneck in Helmand Province of Afghanistan. And I was putting together like seminars, teaching people how to set up wallets, giving away Bitcoin. Right? There's probably a lot of happy GIs and nationals that have Bitcoin or had it at least early. And then I kind of cut career there. I mean, personal story was I got married, and like I thought I had the coolest job ever when I was there. So at the time, I was running basically a small data science group for U.S. Special Forces. And we were doing a whole bunch of kind of data work around the 2014 Afghan presidential elections, around a whole bunch of operational things in country. My primary mission was actually counter IED, which to me felt good, helping remove roadside bombs from the country. And from there, I had to make a choice. Personally, was I got married, and like my next gig that I was offered was to embed with an Afghan commando unit. Which again, if I was 10 years younger and I was in my mid 30s at the time, would have been super cool. But I, took the other option that I had on the table, which was to go back for my PhD. And that was in 2014. Sorry to answer your question.
Yeah, I think it's just super fascinating too, because I think people kind of lose sight to how much tech and how technical like these battle spaces were, right? And kind of having to work from that mindset, and it might have been, a little bit different kind of contextually and according to the mission, but you're talking about pretty serious stuff. And so like it kind of, I feel like it almost probably prepared you well to get into this identity kind of like space with crypto where you got to care about certain things. And there's important pieces that, have to be protected along the way. I would imagine. I don't want to put words in your mouth either, but I'm just kind of, it's an interesting story.
You're going in a great direction. So,
yeah.
There's a lot to it. So I think you're spot on. First of all, like the battle space today is extremely technical, and for me, the battle space that I was working in 2014 is probably different, frankly, than the one that we have now over 10 years later, with probably more of an emphasis on smaller drone type of warfare and a lot of things out there in kind of electronic warfare and so forth. But a few takeaways for me. So I definitely appreciated complexity of battle space and complexity of like my new battle space, which is in Web3 and competing in this marketplace. And then I also really appreciated from kind of like where does this stuff actually have value? Where's the utility in crypto? The first and earliest use case for crypto is literally just the ability to get your assets into a global financial system and out of your kind of idiosyncratic, just where you happen to be born, where you happen to live. And a lot of people around the world, unfortunately, happen to be in jurisdictions that are quite hostile to their personal freedom, quite hostile to privacy, and just are just governed extremely poorly. So the ability to get your assets into something different and greater than that, like in the kind of digital domain with Bitcoin, was the killer use case. Like we've gone beyond that, but it made me appreciate. And like my PhD was actually focused in crypto. I got my dissertation done. My topic was crypto finance. And the idea was looking at kind of cross-country differences in like crypto asset prices and looking at kind of some of the explanatory like determinants of that. And governance was one of the biggest ones. So I just realized early on that crypto had its biggest marginal value to people that were kind of outside of, mature capital markets, mature economies, or well-governed countries.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, you kind of have like the emergence of Bitcoin right after the financial crisis, just at the time too, when you've got people. I mean, even today, right? Like parts of the world where, in the West and in the U.S., like you think banks are just kind of everywhere and you have access to the system, but still in a lot of the parts of the world, even in 2025, it's really hard to kind of access a lot of financial systems, and even though it's years later, but that's super interesting. I mean, and you kind of got into the identity, or tell me more about what you guys are doing with at ZK Verify and in the crypto side of things.
Yeah, besides having cool T-shirts, so the company that run Horizon Labs, like we do, it's basically like the way I look at it is we have a collection of about 60 brilliant people around the world working towards this shared vision of basically trying to make the world freer, fairer, and like to bring modern economics like everywhere, right? And broad, lofty ambition. The way we tackle it, our little niche in this market is on the cryptography side, like basically zero knowledge cryptography, which is a class of cryptography that allows you basically have cryptographic proofs of information, off-chain, on-chain, or whatever, but like preserve privacy, but still have applications that can make use of the data without leaking the data. So it's a really powerful type of tech, and we can talk about its implications here. But two projects that we work on at Horizon Labs, like our namesake Horizon, is privacy preserved execution layer. We were the third ZK project to launch in crypto back in 2017. But now what we're doing is we're actually rolling that as a privacy layer on top of the base ecosystem. So super cool and excited about that project. It's going to have this brand new life, basically providing this privacy utility, which I think is really important for getting kind of end-to-end workflows in finance, but also a lot of other economic activity into the base ecosystem, which I think is one of the hottest basic sources of activity right now in Web3. The second thing, the T-shirt that I'm wearing, ZK Verify, is tackling at the like a modular piece of this cryptography or ZK stack of basically every statement that we want to prove on chain. It starts by generating a proof. You can aggregate them, which means like adding them together and making them more efficient to flow through the system. But at the end of every process, you need to verify cryptographic proof. Now, if you just took a snapshot of Web3 today, that might not be as interesting because we have what we call cryptographic verifiers on chain today. As an example, like you can have an application that preserves the privacy of a transaction, generate a proof and verify that proof in a verifier baked into the Ethereum blockchain, right? So Ethereum, basically every node that's running is basically processing a verification of the proof. Now, that works today in the current state of Web3, but the world that we're building for is one where you have about 1 trillion proofs a year being generated from every single device that we have, whether it's your browser, whether it's your mobile device, your TV, your solar panels, whatever it is. You're generating proofs so that you can actually prove certain pieces of information, preserve the privacy of kind of provenance of that info, in some cases the content of the info, but still make use of it in the global kind of composable world that we have of Web3. So kind of do a state snapshot off chain. It could be your bank account, like how much money you have, the fact that you pay your bills on time, your credit score. Bring that information on chain. You can unlock value in an application like a DeFi app.
Yeah, let's walk through just like a really simple use case for a user, because I think people are pretty familiar with like the current situation. Okay, I go send Rob some crypto on chain, and my address might be also attached to my my Luke.sol or Luke.base.eth or whatever crypto domain name. So all of a sudden my activity is kind of exposed and it's public and it's out there. So what do you guys do change that dynamic?
Yeah, so first of all, big shout out to Zcash as the first organization to bring ZK proofs on chain. It was kind of the mind blowing breakthrough that happened that spawned like Zencash and Horizon and what we're doing today. But what that did, and I bring them up because they provided the basic application, which is literally the ability for Rob to send Luke money, and like it can execute completely on chain. The consensus of the blockchain, so all the nodes that are running the software can verify that Rob does in fact have enough money and Luke has a valid address, and we send money from me to you. The beautiful thing about ZK technology is the world can verify that a valid transaction happened without seeing any of the details of that transaction, which is kind of nuts. So like on a block explorer, basically like the portal or the tool that you have to go look at what's happening on a blockchain, you can see that some transaction happened, but it's basically like a blank in terms of the content. You see that a valid transaction happened, but no one in the world can see that it was me, it was you, or how much was sent in between us. That's the starting point. It's probably the simplest application is just literally transferring value on chain. But then there's so many other kind of richer use cases that get much more sophisticated.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, we even started doing some of this stuff in Brave in 2016 with Ananize initially, for zero knowledge, for doing reporting and things like that, like anonymous reporting, where we had to kind of map out events in a marketing funnel or support to creators or whatever, and we could do it in a way that could we could have confirmations or validations and still actually like give them information that was meaningful without exposing the user's identity. I love it. I mean, like that's why I was super excited to have you on today, because I think that this area is just going to get more and more important, and people are starting to see now that we're moving to a more and more cashless society. But one of those great properties of cash is that I could just go hand you cash and nobody would know, right? Like, and so how do we get parity with these things? And it sounds like you guys are working on some important tech that can help us to kind of get into that kind of a world.
Yeah, so I mean, 100% agree with you. I would say what's really held it back this far, and maybe like the earliest implementation of this stuff, and we came from this early world as well, was just let's throw the technology out there into the wild. We have the tech. We can actually create like a shielded pool that could provide the capabilities so that I can send you money anonymously. Now, the problem is, and I think crypto's big problem today is this not yet really connected to the kind of legal world. And I'm not saying that everything happening on chain is illegal. Far from it. It's just that we need to connect what's happening on chain with smart contracts to be like enforceable real contracts. We need to make sure that, at least from the point of view of the U.S. government and for U.S. citizens in the audience and us as a U.S. company, that all of the things that we're doing on chain are actually not violating like OFAC sanctions lists. We're not helping facilitate money laundering in any way. So now we have the technology. So what I think is most interesting about this point in time with this technology is that we have an intersection of capabilities and technology, so that we can actually scale this stuff into what I would say kind of like real world like digital systems, so that we can check that is a user kind of a valid user of a system who's not on an OFAC sanctions list. Is he not on some terrorist financing list? Is he not on some sort of other like criminal list? Is the information here accessible to their tax authorities? Right? These are those things that in the early cypherpunk days of crypto were sort of like would make us puke to think about these types of concepts.
I think it's a really good point that you bring up too, because it is kind of like we're hitting this next iteration where, I mean, this last year was all about, okay, institutions are starting to adopt things. Mm-hmm. And for a while, it was almost like they kind of had put cold water on all of those players even getting involved in the space, like after FTX collapsed and all of that. But now this past year, you've seen more, okay, ETFs are starting to get approved. And now you're starting to see this wave of the banking ecosystem ecosystem adopting, stable coins are just this really, really hot area right now. And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but like we're kind of at this stage where you've got this base case where everything can be super private in this way that is just like a base, like a Zcash type of shielded transaction condition set. And then you've got this new layer where we need to be able to maintain privacy for individuals while connecting them to these highly regulated players, right? Is that fair?
Exactly. It is absolutely fair. And even now, when you're not connected to highly regulated players, but like as an example, and we all like in the US just went through this with, April 15th tax day is when you need to report, or the start of the year for last year's like financial activities, like you need some sort of credible statement of what happened like in your financial life so that you can report it, to the IRS. Okay, we may not like that for like early crypto adopters, but it's the reality that we live in. If we're in a jurisdiction where we just want now crypto to be a normal part of our lives, we don't want it to be something different from the normal world. We want Web3 and financial, TradFi to come together. They have to. Like, it just makes a ton of sense. So in order to make that happen, we need to make sure that we have systems that are actually compliant. So as an example, like Horizon is kind of the this OG, ZK crypto project that we've had that was, originally fully anonymous, that now is having a new breath of life on Base as a regulatory compliant privacy layer, because we want users to be able to like participate in a way that's not going to, kick them in the butt later on for doing something maybe they shouldn't have.
Oh, it's interesting too. I mean, because it just kind of shows kind of the evolution of the space and the progression. Where now that you've got like, okay, we can work on an L2, right? Like and offload some things and kind of focus in on these other things. And it just seems like kind of looking for discovering that market fit where you have a good chance of that happening, right? Like because the space has been the funny thing with crypto. I was going to ask you about this, like. We deal with challenges within the ecosystem, like from crypto native people and across the entire range of that spectrum, and then with more traditional, whether it's regulators or traditional finance players. Like, have you been working with the traditional side very much, and what are some of the challenges that you've seen on both sides of that?
So interestingly enough, as customers, not so much. If you look at our customer book right now, it's largely Web3 companies. And part of that is just because we're crypto native ourselves. We've been in the space for a while. And we have certain key infrastructure that the crypto companies use, right? So now, that said, where we're gearing up and why we're going over to the Base ecosystem is because we think that it represents one of the more credible kind of sources or like destinations for institutions and just businesses, frankly, to come on chain. And Coinbase has done a phenomenal job leading the way there. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's still early days, but it's really important, though, for us to actually meld these worlds and stop like siloing these things where it's either crypto or TradFi. Like, I don't think that makes sense long term. And throw AI into the mix. Like, we all have to, kind of like, drizzle the AI hype onto everything we do these days. But the reality is, like, I think crypto is the currency and the rails for AI, like, hands down. I don't think agents are going to be kind of autonomous, like, issuing micropayments, with bank wires. It's not going to happen. They're going to use cryptocurrencies, right? So, like, the future is definitely going to include crypto. It's no longer a question. And I think that, humans need to come along for that ride.
Yeah, and how far along are you guys with these different pieces of your stack? Like, are these things in testnet? Are they in production? Where are you guys at with these things?
Yeah, so testnet is where we are. I mean, like, Horizon's been a long operating blockchain since 2017, but the version 2 of it that we're launching on Base is on testnet right now, and we'll be doing the token transition first end of June, and then we'll be launching the platform shortly thereafter. ZK Verify, it has been a testnet for about 6 months now, and we're really just battle testing that. For greenlighting that launch, to me, it was all about business metrics. I wanted to show that there's actually PMF here, a product market fit, so that we're actually not just launching something for the sake of it, which I think we do too much as an industry, and making sure that we actually have credible user traction and we're solving real problems out there for customers. The good news for us is that now we have a pretty fantastic BD pipeline that has solid conversions and a great cross-section of use cases that I'm pretty excited about. So internally, we've greenlit that thing. It's just kind of a matter of TGE for the token, exchange listings, and all those kinds of things that we have to worry about in Web3 that normal businesses in Web2 don't really have to think about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and what are some of the applications for ZK Verify? Are you guys like focused in on one, or are people using it for various different things, or what's kind of the focus?
No, so there's a solid cross section here. So one of the kind of like Web3 native things that just makes a ton of sense and is consistent with everything that we've been talking about is private dark pools, actually. So like there's beyond the fact that a lot of institutions don't want to come on chain and have their transactions visible to the public. There's also just the pragmatic reality of kind of what we call like MEV or extraction of value, just by virtue of blockchains being transparent and by broadcasting transactions, there are people that can front run you in the systems. So it's pragmatic, like value kind of like loss or slippage by people trading on chain, that having a dark pool out there, and again, regulatory compliant, private or dark pool is our first kind of flagship application that we're launching, and super excited about that. And we have an amazing partner and user of the system that's running that project. Others, though, are also, like, I would say, equally interesting. One use case that I think is going to be like a killer use case for crypto is actually, and for ZK, it's called ZKTLS. And what it is getting a cryptographic snapshot of data off chain and bringing it on chain. So basically, like, with TLS, where you kind of your browser do a secure handshake with your bank server, and the bank server serves your browser information about your bank statement. Well, what we could do is actually generate a cryptographic proof snapshot in time that this was in fact the correct server, or this was the server that's publicly registered to serve the information. We have like that data kind of encapsulated in a ZK proof so that the public can't see the data, but now you can ingest that proof into a DeFi system and actually maybe execute like a lending transaction, or borrow assets using your credit history and collateral to unlock value on chain. So there's a massive amount of value of just bringing information off chain on chain for a lot of different reasons. That's one use case with customer that we have that we're super excited about. There's other things as well, like just the ability to kind of bring invoicing information on chain, so you can do factoring of invoices. I think super interesting. Yeah, digital
these are things that people think it's not boring or something, but they're actually like really big problems in the space.
Exactly.
Like, I want to do a business, I want to pay people, but I can't connect this on-chain space to someone to buy groceries, right? Like, it's just how do I get that value from A to B?
Or the $8 trillion underserved market for SMEs internationally that just can't syndicate loans to expand their businesses or capitalize their companies, but they're solid credit qualities. They pay their bills on time. They have a viable business with like actual transaction records, but they can't share this information in a credible way with, say, a hedge fund in New York that could actually syndicate a loan to finance their business. So like, these are those types of things, by providing the rails and connecting the dots in a composable Web3 type of way that has to be privacy preserving, right? Because like, there's so many elements of the stack here, whether it's giving away your invoicing data to your competitor or whatever that you don't want to do as a business or can't do. Now we have the technology to handle. So another amazing use case that kind of closes the loop on that is digital identity on chain. And I think the important thing here has to be privacy preserving, because everything that we do on chain is linkable forever, right? So like, even if I can't figure out what the weird hex address is for your ETH address and know that it's you today, someone tomorrow will be able to figure out that that's your address and then correlate everything that you've ever done, on chain with that and you as a human. So I think having privacy to on-chain identity and linking this to all of the financial applications that are going to be on-chain soon is critical.
The identity piece is really interesting. I mean, because, it's such a kind of you've got, and I think we're seeing this right now in Europe, where you have GDPR, right, which has these right to be forgotten elements to it, and there's laws, and then are people even going to really enforce them fully or whatever? That whole bucket of things. But then you're dealing with immutable blockchains on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like, and you almost need to have something in between those two. And this is what's really interesting about what you're talking about, right? Because if you can prove somebody's identity without having to put those identification properties accessible on chain for somebody, then you're kind of able to have something exist in this current. I mean, right now it's all over the place. They're talking about, oh, you have to be able to delete a blockchain. It's insane. But like when it gets back to Earth, right? Like you're going to have some kind of ZK solution, I would imagine, in order to do this. Is that fair? Is that accurate? Like I don't know. We saw a bunch of protocols like. And I'm talking 2017-ish, right? ICO era where they're like, oh, we're going to put all your data on chain. And we're just like, that's not compliant even in best, worst case scenario, whatever. But now it's actually getting to the point where with AI, right? Like you need to be able to prove that somebody's real, that's putting something out there, whether it's payment, royalties, whatever. ZK is going to be that missing link. Is that fair to say? I'm just kind of want to make sure that the audience understands.
I think you're spot on. So first of all, let's hope the regulators remain sort of reasonable. Like you have to be like 100% just sort of like ballpark reasonable. There's a lot of value that having immutable ledgers brings to the world. So don't try to kill the technology. It's not going to happen, right? So trying to force like that is the wrong path of legislation, but I'm not a legislator. So take my opinion for what it's worth, not much. But I think the missing piece of technology though is ZK, because if we can actually keep information off chain, but do like cryptographic proofs of that information and then make use of it on chain to unlock certain types of transactions, then I think we're good. Now, again, it does require like regulators to be sort of reasonable, because like there's got to be some types of things that are allowed to happen on an immutable ledger. That means the information is there forever. But there's certain types of information like PII that probably want to keep off chain and just generate state snapshots of that information, bring it on chain for specific reasons, for specific durations, right? But like regulators have to be okay with that in order for this whole thing to work. But I think there's a reasonable middle ground.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting time right now too, because even how some of these things are classified, right, as like personal data. I mean, it's great that people have tried to define that, but also it really is a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. And now you've got use cases popping up all over the place, like even this coining things where people are like, someone took my picture, put it online, like, and you're starting to, and it's all part of the process, right? Like when things, new technologies, and but I feel like now we haven't had an opportunity over the past, I'll even stretch it out to 6 years, where you could experiment enough to get that market fit that you need, and I feel like we're much more optimistic about the potential. I mean, you talk about this money that's potentially unlocked, right? Like for U.S. or otherwise industry, right? That this could open up, and it's just huge. And the stablecoin adoption is just huge, and it's just it's really exciting. So I'm really stoked to hear that you guys are doing this work, and that it's getting out there. I want to you mentioned something earlier, and I just was reminded of it. You mentioned shielded pools. Like, can we talk a little bit about that? Like, unpack that a little bit for folks that might not be familiar with the concept?
Yeah, so the concept of shielded pool is basically you use cryptography to create this safe zone so that you can actually transfer assets into a sort of black box. They're there, and there's basically the state of those assets is maintained in the black box, and things can happen. You can transfer them within the black box. And then when you want to make use of them outside of the black box, you can transfer them out. We call this black box in like the ZK world, especially the Zcash type of ZK world, a shielded pool, right? So you can view it as like really this kind of overlay or kind of like element within a system, and you can send things in there. Now, there's some potential issues with it, right? Like from like a regulatory perspective. And then, like once money's in there, like it literally is a black box, and you have no idea who's doing what, right? And then it's also permissionless in systems like Zcash for money to go in and out of these things. But it's an easy intersection of technologies to have like a KYC, AML gating on the front end or back end of that black box, right? So I think that's where we are now with the tech, and that's at least how we look at it.
Cool. Now, I mean, I know this is a pretty technical area, and what are some of the ways that are you guys working on trying to kind of unpack a lot of this for developers and individuals, and kind of like how do you feel the level of understanding is among people, even at the developer level, around this stuff? Because I see stuff all over the place, and even in the privacy space, it's like some of the things that I hear from like hand wavy kind of projects is alarming. But I'm just curious, like you're working in it, right? Like, and you're trying to like implement these things. Are you finding that it's easy for developers to adopt once they kind of get the concept?
So I would say that the current state of awareness is probably terrible. So just to be frank, right? And running a company that's in this space, right? This is clearly a problem. Like it's a headwind, but we know it, and it's really a product problem because like how do you just simplify things and make it easier for people? So I think some of the best, entrepreneurs in the space are working on the products just to make things way simpler. I'm not going to say we're some of the best entrepreneurs in the space, but we are also working on tools to make things way simpler. You can think about one example here would be historically, in order to like execute ZK within an application, you do have to write what's called a circuit, basically, which handles all of the types of constraints and logic and everything of what are you trying to prove? How are you proving it? What proving system are you using? Going from like math to constructing this thing into software. Very complex, and this used to be all bespoke stuff. And we have a team that for years has been doing the bespoke stuff. These days, you have things like ZK virtual machines, ZK VMs, that actually allow you to code in a language that you're used to, maybe like a ZK AVM, where you're still coding in Solidity, and then it compiles actually underneath all of that into the ZK circuit. So it's actually much more generalizable and much easier from the perspective of a developer. There's other SDKs that people use. What we're trying to do from like the Horizon level is, if we're successful, we're going to be providing SDKs and middleware so the applications on Base and other ecosystems could just pull them in and actually run the privacy layer like through Horizon, even though it technically sits as an L3 on top of Base. But just you have a very simple integration to an application that shouldn't have to move from Base L2. Liquidity shouldn't have to move, and you're just able to execute your logic privately end to end using the Horizon module. That's on that side. On the ZK Verify side, the state of the world was basically you need to write your circuit and your verifier, plop that verifier onto some piece of infrastructure like Ethereum, maintain it over time, hope it's not buggy, right? And upgrade it as the proof systems themselves upgrade, right? And this is not a nice thing to do. And if you want your app to run on other pieces of infrastructure, cool, you've got your verifier on Ethereum, then good luck figuring out how to convert that thing into Rust and deploying it on Solana, right? Like, so there's this like just toughness of like barriers for developers. So with ZK Verify, we're supposed to be like the way we're going to market is a single stop for just send us your proofs, period. Don't worry about the verifiers. Don't worry about maintaining them. Don't worry about security because we audit. We do all that stuff ourselves. We run the bug bounty programs. Like we're the gold standard for verification layers. And you don't have to worry about deploying this on lots of different platforms because we already do. And we maintain all of those things. So literally just worry about your application, use a module that makes it easy to RPC into our system, send us your proofs, and we handle everything else. We send them the results wherever you need them. So these are the kinds of things that at the end of the day, you have a lot of different companies like us that are, maybe not a lot, but you have some companies like us that are out there trying to make it way easier.
Yeah. No, it's all, and it's great to see like that there's more variety kind of popping up because it just kind of shows the demand for privacy is increasing, right? Which it obviously should be. I think, just to zoom out a little bit more, like, is there a conversation that's currently not being had in this space that you really wish that people would be having? This could be related to what you're doing or not. Like, I'm just kind of curious for your take on it.
So I'll blend this with what you just said on like the demand for privacy is increasing. I don't think it's increasing fast enough or just enough or fast enough. I'll say right. Because I think what really stalled privacy, and we felt this as an organization and with our open source project with Horizon, the launch as a privacy coin was we felt persecuted, to be frank. Mm-hmm. Like we felt that privacy was bad from like regulators' perspective, not from our perspective, and that we were always being persecuted. We were getting exchange delistings for tokens, that privacy tokens, right? And I think that this just like put like a hard stop in a lot of people's minds. Like you still had your hardcore privacy projects like us, like Railgun and others that were still building, but most people just thought of privacy as basically, they wrote it off. Like, okay, can't do it, not going to invest a lot of time or kind of like mental energy into it. All of that's changed, guys. So the war in crypto, in my mind, is over, at least in the US, which I think is probably the biggest and most important market for that to happen. And now it's just a matter of like, guys, get out there, race and build. The thing is, just make sure that you're doing it in a responsible way where if your users are in the US, intersect with an AML or KYC AML system, so you can actually verify identities. And like the cool thing about like a ZK ID as an example is that can verify that Luke, you're a human. I don't care which human you are. I don't care what you've done with anything else in your life. I just care that you are a unique human being, and you can prove that on chain. And then that's a starting point to interact with a whole like rich world of privacy preserving applications.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree on it not moving fast enough either. And I think right now it's really interesting too, because we're getting this point where you've got these big entities that are starting to kind of look at crypto seriously or even integrate it at some levels at the same time where you've got this like real need for solutions around things like TikToks and social media, where you've got kids that are accessing these things younger and younger, and age verification is so easy to beat, right? Like, and if there should just be a better way to do this, like, and get at least more options on the menu, right? Like, the rubber's meeting the road on all the tires kind of at this point in time. So I think it's super important, like what you're saying, where just having that conversation. And that's one of the reasons why I'm like super glad you had made the time to come on here, and really appreciate it. Because I think the more we get different voices like working on these projects out there, the better, because nobody can describe it the way that you can when you're, kind of in charge of putting the work out there. So I think, I really appreciate you making the time today. Where can people find out more about what you're working on and then follow you online to see what you're posting about?
Well, on their Brave browser, they can go to Twitter or X.
I appreciate that.
And they can find me there. I mean, I do want to shout out, you probably get this all the time, but myself, my team, and like most people that I know are big fans of Brave. We do it because you guys respect privacy fundamentally, and also like you've been supportive of the Web3 ecosystem from almost the beginning. And that means a lot, especially to companies and people like me. So anyway, like if you want to reach out to me, it's Rob Viglione on X, and then, or just come to the website, like horizonlabs.io. Now, Horizon is Horizon, like Zen, because, our cryptocurrency, the Zen, but which I think was a super cool name or ticker symbol for a currency.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Token. But that's it. Like we're always available. The team's basically, we make a point of like, we're just out there, like, with our community. It's kind of like one of these things of community market fit more so than product market fit. And we've just been out there with our community for years. So come and reach out and have join the conversation.
No, it's great. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, appreciate the kind words. It's such a cool thing to see, like when we started, people were saying, like, doubting whether people even cared about privacy. Now we've got folks like you on talking about ways that we're kind of able to connect privacy to the bigger world and the bigger financial ecosystem and everybody to kind of make this a worldwide thing. And yeah, I'd love to have you guys back on too, to like, after you guys launch and get some updates and, see how things are going too. And yeah, so folks, please check out stuff. And thanks again for making the time to come today.
No, thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Brave Technologist podcast. To never miss an episode, make sure you hit follow in your podcast app. If you haven't already made the switch to the Brave browser, you can download it for free today at brave.com and start using Brave Search, which enables you to search the web privately. Brave also shields you from the ads, trackers, and other creepy stuff following you across the web.